No one goes into the woods expecting to die. People go there to disappear for a few hours, to get away from the city lights, from the noise, from the streets, from parents asking questions, from school, from the same ordinary life repeating itself every single day. The woods feel different at night. They make you believe the world is smaller, quieter, safer, like nothing from the outside can reach you there. But sometimes, that silence is not protection. Sometimes, it is only waiting. On the night of November 17th, 1973, 5 teenagers left Sioux Falls and drove toward a quiet park near the border of Iowa and South Dakota. The park was called Gitchie Manitou. To most people back then, it was just a peaceful place with trees, stone shelters, narrow paths, and open sky. A place for walking, camping, sitting around a fire. A place where nothing terrible was supposed to happen. But after that night, the name Gitchie Manitou would mean something else. It would become one of those names that people say carefully. A place remembered not because of what it looked like, but because of what happened there after dark. The 5 teenagers were Roger, Mike, Stu, Dana, and Sandra.
They were young. They were ordinary. And that is what makes this story so disturbing. They were not running from anyone. They were not involved in anything dangerous. They were not expecting trouble. They were just teenagers looking for a place to spend the night away from town. They drove into the park after sunset. By then, the cold had already settled over the ground. It was the kind of cold that makes the air feel sharp when you breathe in, the kind of cold that makes your hands stiff, the kind of cold that makes a fire feel like the most important thing in the world. Most of the leaves had already fallen from the trees. The ground was covered in dry brush and brittle leaves that cracked under every step. Above them, the branches were bare, black against the night sky, twisting and crossing over each other like old bones. They stopped near a stone shelter, a quiet place, hidden enough to feel private, open enough to see the firelight move across the trees. They gathered wood, they started a fire, and for a while everything felt normal. The flames rose slowly at first, then brighter, orange light flickering across their faces. The smoke drifted upward, breaking apart in the cold air.
Someone laughed. Someone probably said something stupid. Someone threw another piece of wood into the fire. For a short time, it was just a night out. 5 teenagers, a campfire, the sound of wind moving through the trees. And beyond the circle of firelight, darkness. That is the strange thing about a fire in the woods. It makes you feel safe, but it also shows you how much darkness is around you. Inside the light, you can see everything. Faces, hands, smoke, the ground beneath your feet. But just a few steps away, the world disappears. The trees become shapes, the shadows become deeper, and every sound feels closer than it should. A branch snapping, leaves moving, wind passing through stone. At first, those sounds mean nothing, because the woods are always making noise. But then, every once in a while, there is a sound that does not feel natural. A sound that makes someone stop talking. A sound that makes everyone listen. Maybe one of them heard something. Maybe Sandra looked past the fire and into the trees. Maybe one of the boys turned his head and stared into the dark for a second longer than usual. There is no way to know exactly when the mood changed. But at some point that night, the woods no longer felt empty. And then, headlights appeared. At first, it was only a faint glow between the trees, a pale light moving slowly through the park. Then the beams grew brighter. The shape of a car came into view. In an empty park, late at night, a car is not automatically frightening. People get lost. People take wrong turns. Sometimes other groups come to the same place. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe the car would pass. Maybe whoever was inside would keep driving.
But the car did not pass. It slowed down. Then it stopped. The fire kept burning. The teenagers watched.
For a few seconds, no one moved. Car doors opened. 3 men stepped out. They were brothers, the Fryer brothers, and something about them was wrong from the beginning. Not because they looked like monsters. They did not. That is the part that makes true crime so hard to understand. The worst people do not always arrive looking evil. Sometimes they look ordinary. They wear ordinary clothes. They drive ordinary cars. They speak in ordinary voices. And then, suddenly, the night changes forever. The 3 men walked toward the teenagers. The firelight caught pieces of them as they came closer. A jacket, a face, a hand, a shadow moving across the ground. The teenagers did not know what they wanted. Maybe they thought it was a warning. Maybe they thought the men were angry about them being in the park. Maybe they thought there would be some shouting, some threats, and then it would be over. But the men had brought guns, and once the teenagers saw that, everything became different. There are moments in life when your body understands danger before your mind can explain it. Your mouth goes dry, your stomach drops, your heart starts beating so hard you can hear it. You look for a way out, but suddenly every direction seems closed. The woods that felt wide open a few minutes earlier now feel like a trap. The men came closer. One of them started talking. His voice had control in it. Not panic, not confusion. Control. The kind of voice that tells everyone else in the room, or in this case, everyone else in the woods, that he believes he is in charge. The laughter was gone now. The easy, careless feeling of the night had disappeared. The fire cracked softly between them. No one knew what to say. No one knew what would make things better. And sometimes, in moments like that, silence becomes its own kind of terror. Because everyone is waiting for the next thing to happen, and no one wants to be the reason it happens. The threats became real. The guns were no longer just something they had seen. They were now the center of the night. The campfire was still burning, but it no longer felt warm. It only lit up the fear on their faces. 1 second, the flames showed their eyes. The next second, the shadows took them back. For the teenagers, time must have changed in those moments. A few seconds can feel endless when you do not know if you will survive them. Every movement matters. Every breath feels too loud. Every word could be the wrong one. And then, the night broke. 4 of the boys were killed near that campfire. Roger, Mike, Stu, Dana. 4 young lives ended in a place they had gone to feel free. Sandra survived, but surviving that night did not mean escaping it. She had seen too much, heard too much, lost too much. She was only 13 years old, a child, and in a single night, she had been forced to witness something that no child should ever carry. The men took her away from the scene. Later, they let her go. Maybe they thought fear would silence her. Maybe they thought shock would make her confused. Maybe they thought no one would believe her. Maybe they thought a young girl, alone and terrified, would not be strong enough to tell the truth. But they were wrong. Sandra spoke. And because she spoke, the darkness of that night did not stay hidden in the woods. The next morning, the park was no longer quiet in the same way. People came through and found what had been left behind. Police arrived. The area was sealed. The stone shelter, the fire site, the surrounding trees, everything became part of a crime scene. A place that only hours earlier had been filled with teenage voices was now surrounded by investigators, questions, and silence. News spread quickly. 4 teenagers were dead. 1 girl had survived. And a small community was left trying to understand how something like this could happen so close to home. That is one of the cruelest things about crimes like this. They do not only take the victims, they change everyone around them. Parents look at their children differently. Empty roads feel longer. Parks feel darker. The ordinary world starts to feel unsafe because people realize the truth they never wanted to face. Evil does not always live far away. Sometimes it drives the same roads you drive. Sometimes it comes from nearby. Sometimes it has a name people already know. Sandra's testimony became the key. She told investigators what she remembered: the men, the car, the voices, the fear. Piece by piece, her words gave shape to the nightmare, and those words led police to the Fryer brothers. In court, the night at Gitchie Manitou was brought back again. But this time, there was no fire, no wind, no trees, only a courtroom, only testimony, only details spoken out loud in front of people who had to listen. The Fryer brothers were convicted. But even after the verdict, the story did not feel finished. Because justice can punish the guilty, but it cannot put the night back the way it was.
It cannot bring back Roger.
It cannot bring back Mike. It cannot bring back Stu. It cannot bring back Dana. And it cannot give Sandra the childhood she had before that fire. After the murders, Gitchie Manitou changed. Of course, the trees were still there. The paths were still there. The stones were still there. But people no longer saw the park the same way. Some said the place felt too quiet. Some said the wind sounded strange near the old shelter. Some said that if you stood there at night, you could feel something in the darkness. Not see it, not hear it clearly, just feel it, like the woods remembered. Maybe those stories were only born from grief. Maybe people needed to believe the park itself had changed because the truth was too hard to accept. Maybe the silence felt haunted because everyone knew what had happened inside it. But some places do feel marked, not by ghosts, not by legends, but by memory, by fear, by the weight of what people suffered there. And Gitchie Manitou became one of those places. Today, if you go there in daylight, you might not see anything frightening. You may see trees moving in the wind, a quiet path, stone, grass, open sky. You may hear birds. You may hear leaves. You may hear nothing at all. But if you know the story, the silence is different. Because you know that one night, 5 teenagers sat near a fire in that park.
You know they were probably laughing.
Probably cold. Probably thinking the night was still young. You know headlights appeared through the trees. You know 3 men stepped out of a car. You know 4 teenagers never made it home. And you know 1 girl survived to tell the world what happened. That is why this case is still terrifying. Not because of anything supernatural, not because of a creature in the woods, not because of a curse, but because it was real. Because it happened on an ordinary night, to ordinary people, in an ordinary place. And the danger did not come from some dark legend. It came in a car, with headlights, with footsteps, with men who looked human because they were human. And maybe that is the hardest part to accept. The woods were not the monster. The darkness was not the monster. The night itself was not the monster. The monsters walked out of the car, and by the time the teenagers understood what had entered their world, it was already too late. So the next time you see a small fire burning in the woods, the next time you hear leaves moving in the dark, the next time headlights appear somewhere they should not be, remember Gitchie Manitou. Remember that danger does not always announce itself. Sometimes it arrives slowly, quietly, almost normally. It pulls up beside you. It opens the door. It steps into the firelight. And from that moment on, nothing is ordinary again. Not the woods, not the silence, not the sound of wind moving through the trees, and not even a small fire burning in the middle of a cold November night.